Hello, and welcome to today's Tech Talk. I'm Dolores Bernardo, and I'm with People Development. I'm so pleased to be introducing Bill George today. Bill is an inspiring leader. His work is often quoted in Google's leadership development programs, as well as he's been quoted in Meng's book, Search Inside Yourself, so lots of Google connections. Bill has spent over 30 years in executive leadership positions. As CEO of Medtronic, he built the company into the world's leading medical technology company, from a market capitalization of $1 billion to $60 billion. So he knows business. Currently, he's professor at Harvard Business School. His 2004 book, Authentic Leadership, was a Business Week bestseller. We're lucky to have him with us today to tell us about his follow-on book to Authentic Leadership, Discover Your True North, which features over 100 profiles of leaders. In Discover Your True North, Bill has profiled what's changed in the last 10 years about leadership. On a personal note, I turn to Bill George's work on value-centered leadership whenever I'm facing a tough challenge, and I know many Google leaders do. Discover Your True North offers a concrete, comprehensive guide to becoming an authentic leader and reveals how you can chart your path to success. So please join me in welcoming Bill George.
Thank you guys for coming. I'm really excited about being here. I'm going to do a talk today that goes well beyond the book. I feel it's a privilege to be at the world's most innovative company. This is something I've said in writing about Google, and I really believe that you are indeed that. I have great admiration for your leaders. Eric Schmidt and I served together on the Mayo Clinic board, and he is an amazing leader, what he's done in this company. Larry and Sergey, of course, as founders, have stayed with it, have grown as leaders, have wisely looked to other leaders like Eric to coach them through the processes. And I think it's pretty remarkable how this company has grown. But now I think the opportunities in front of you as Alphabet are staggering. I mean, when I first heard you're going into self-driving cars, I said, you know, have they lost their mind? And then I started learning more about it, and I said, this is amazing. And that's just one of many, many ventures you're going into. And so I think the future is virtually unlimited. In your new organization, I wrote an article a few weeks back. I believe it really is setting the standard for all innovative companies, because the toughest problem that companies have is how do you sustain your growth? For 30 years, my role model of a company was Hewlett-Packard. Dave Packard, I met Dave Packard back in 1968 when I was leaving the Pentagon. He was coming in as Deputy Secretary. He and Bill Hewlett, boy, they taught us a lot about management, wandering around, being engaged, but the company lost it. You know, they went over the hill, and today I don't think any of you would consider them a terribly innovative company. It's true, they're a big company, but not innovative. So how do you sustain that innovation? Because oftentimes bureaucracy pushes against innovation. It wants to kill it, and it wants to starve it, and all kind of mavericks get pushed out of organization. And it's a tragedy when that happens. And so I want to thank Dolores for not just your introduction, but for inviting me here, for Meng Tan, who's done so many great things here. I interviewed him. He's in the book talking about his work on meditation. And also to Trudy McKenna. Where'd Trudy go? There she is, for the work she's done here. And I think you all have done wonderful work in leadership development. But I want to talk about something different today. It builds on the book, but I want to talk about innovation leaders. Because my conclusion is that there are literally tens of thousands of excellent innovators out there. You see them throughout the world, throughout the country. This is the most innovative place in the world, but there are lots of innovators. And you go to any of the schools, I teach at Harvard Business School, everyone wants to be an innovator. And everyone at Stanford wants to be an innovator. And it is a very innovative place. And Caltech, I went to Georgia Tech, where I'll be later on. They all want to be innovators. But the real gap is with innovation leaders. Not many people know how to lead innovation. So that's what I want to talk about today. I'll talk a few minutes about what the challenges we face and how leadership has changed over the last decade, and then kind of move into what it takes to be an innovation leader in today's world, because I think this is something that's not well understood. So let me start with talking about how leadership has changed dramatically over the last 10 years. You know, when I was growing up, leadership was very hierarchical. And we had very highly structured companies like AT&T and General Motors. And today, it's all about empowerment. And to be honest, those of you who are millennials or Gen Xers, like my family is, aren't going to work in a hierarchical organization. You don't want to be directed. You want to have the freedom to go out and innovate yourself. And I think that is, why not, you know? But why do we create these hierarchical structures? They made everyone comfortable. Even the military's gone away from them. So the second thing is bureaucracy. No one wants to work in a bureaucratic organization. How do you create a series of interdependent units? You're trying to do the alphabet. You've done it within Google. How do you have interdependent teams so you can learn from each other, but build on each other, but have the freedom to go off and do your own thing? The third thing is we've gone from an era of limited information to full transparency. Obviously, Google's mission is to support that and help that. But think what happened last week in the congressional testimony. The CEO of Volkswagen US, after having admitted that the engineers intentionally falsified emissions tests in cars for 11 million cars, blamed it on the lowest level engineers. You know, I'm very cynical. I wrote an article that's going to come out tomorrow on this subject because, you know, let's blame it on the engineers. Let's forget about the fact that the high level executives supported it. And he said, no, we're not going to disclose any documents. They've committed a crime. I mean, that's the reality. It's against the law to falsify emissions tests. And they're going to be held to account. And you know that the courts are going to, and the lawyers are going to get out all the documents. So today you have to be fully transparent. I always tell CEOs, you're a public figure. Everything you say, you think in private, it's going to be outside the company. Everything you do in your own time, somebody's going to take a Facebook picture of you or a movie of you or tape record what you said. It's all public, so be careful what you say. You just get over there. That's the reality. And a lot of people at heads organizations are very uncomfortable. But today, we live in a transparent world. I think that's a good thing. I think we should have access to all the information. In my day, it was all about charisma. And so you didn't feel like you were yourself. I'm not charismatic, so I can't be a leader. Yeah, a lot of the best leaders are not very charismatic. Do they have to become? Do they have to be like Jack Welch? Do they have to learn to fake it to make it? I don't think so. I think it's really all about being who you are. It's being authentic and being real. And that's what leadership is all about. And then, you know, I think we were trained in an era of self-interest. Today's era, particularly with Gen Xers and Millennials, has really changed. I think we're in an era where we're actually trying to make a difference in the world. We're not just trying to make a lot of money. You can make a lot of money and lead a miserable life. You'll all do well financially, but that's not the question. The question is, what are you going to leave behind? How are you going to make a difference? And how can you work to serve others? Because I believe the best leaders are servant leaders. So let me cite 4 things that have really changed. The first of them is globalization. We live in a global world. Why would we fight immigration? We're a nation of immigrants. You know, all of us, except if anyone in the room is a pure Native American, have all immigrated from somewhere. Our families have come from somewhere. We live in a global world. Let's honor that global world, and the global diversity that brings us makes us that much stronger. Okay? The second thing, technology has changed everything. It's brought us this transparency. It's brought us instant communications. It's brought us instant access to what's going on. You know, you can't just read the newspapers anymore. You have to be on Google News to find out what happened in the last hour. Third, I think the millennials have changed everything because they are going to not just ask for, but seek out and demand opportunities to make a difference at a young age. I had my first general management position at age 27. Someone gave me an opportunity. It was my first leadership role. But I tell you, it's the best learning I had. I made a lot of mistakes, but it's the best learning I ever had having that kind of role. And then finally, back to the whole immigration question, we should honor diversity because diversity, see, I don't believe in quotas. I never have believed in quotas. What I think you should bring people with diverse life experiences around the table. I don't care what their gender, their race, their religion, their sexual preference, national origin. That's not what matters. It's getting diverse people around the table. And I think you're going to make better decisions and you're going to learn a lot more. If you're just with people of your own tribe, so to speak, you won't really learn about how the rest of the world operates, okay? So let me just compare the old world we grew up in and how it's changed today and what I call the authentic leader's view. And unfortunately, we haven't overcome our tendency to maximize short-term value. In fact, one of the clever things about the Google two-class voting structure, it gives you some freedom from that. But I worked a lot with DuPont, and last week Ellen Kullman resigned, was fired. Draw your own conclusions. But it's a real sad thing, because she was doing, in my opinion, a terrific job for DuPont. But it is such a short-term world. She had a bad quarter. I tell you, as a leader, you can have a bad quarter. You will have a bad quarter. You'll miss your budget. The numbers won't go your way. If you're generating revenues, they won't always hit. There's no such thing as up, up, and straight up. You know, it's not like you're on a rocket ship to the moon with no deviations. You're going to hit bad times. Things are not going to go your way. And frankly, that's a real test. So I think you got to build for the long term. How do you sustain success? Achieve short-term results, but sustain success for the long term. I think we've lived in a world which is very shareholder focused, and I think it's really all about the customers. One of the people I really admire, I focus in the book, is Narayan Murthy, the CEO of Infosys. And he said something very perceptive. He said, unless you create sustainable value for your customers, you cannot create sustainable value for your shareholders. In other words, unless you're providing value to the people you serve, Medtronic is providing genuine value from its products, its defibrillators, its spinal products, its diabetes products. Unless it's better than any of the competitors, Medtronic's going to go out of business. That's happened to General Motors. They lost 65% of their U.S. market share, and they wound up in bankruptcy. Because the reason was not because of any exogenous factors. It was all because they had failed to meet their customers' needs, and no one drove their automobiles anymore. So I think it's all about how do you provide sustainable value to your customers. Okay? Third, most companies have been driven as multinationals. You have a strong center, and you branch out to the other areas. Today, we're learning what we can learn so much by our engagement in other markets. We let that come back here. What people really want is very different. Unilever, a great consumer products company, has got 65% of its business comes from emerging markets, not from non-US, but from emerging markets. And they have a formula where they go in and really learn about the market. So the soups that people want in Vietnam are different than the soups they want in China. Sometimes they come up with great products as a result of that, and then they leverage their corporate strengths against those needs. But it all starts with understanding what people's needs. And, and I know you face some difficulties in certain countries like China. We'll find a way eventually, I think, through that. It's too important a company and there are ways, or country, and there are ways around that. But there are differences in laws and regulations, and so we got to find our way through that. Leadership is no longer just from the top, and I think this company illustrates that very well. We need leaders at all levels, and we need ideas bubbling up. I tell leaders today, find out who the informal leaders in your organization are. Maybe they have no direct reports. Maybe they're an innovator in one of your labs. Those are the people I learned from at Medtronic. Find out who those people are and really listen to them. Let them guide you. If you do that, your company is going to be much more successful, I can tell you. So you need leaders at all levels. We were just working on a video for future leaders. It's hard to develop leaders. It's hard to develop enough leaders. At Medtronic, we never had any bench strength. We never felt we had enough leaders. But you need to do that. Otherwise, you'll get very stale. And I think today you need to really flatten your organization at the same time. So I think the key is not getting tied up in an internal focus where all your time is spent on internal meetings or in meetings to talk about customers. You got to get out there and figure out what is it they want, what do they do, be a customer yourself, use the products, but figure it out. When I got to Medtronic, I'd had 25 years of experience in high-tech industries, but zero experience in the medical field. The way I learned the business was not from the engineers teaching me how to design a defibrillator, because I figured I never could do that anyway. I went out and gowned up and saw between 700 and 1,000 procedures over 12 years, where I'd put on the greens, go to Stanford University Medical Hospital, meet a doctor there, 6:30 in the morning, go in and watch one doctor do heart surgery, another doctor doing angioplasty, and a third doctor do a different procedure, watch. And so that's how I learned the business. And it was the most invaluable thing. And I came back and said to our people, you need to get out with the customers. I remember one guy who had a master's from MIT, and he said, look, I didn't get a master's from MIT to sit around some hospital operating room. I'm here to design products. I said, how do you know what design? How do you know how people want to use the product? How do you understand it? So I think today it's having that external focus. I don't care what business you're in. And finally, You need rules. You can't run a company without rules. You have to have compliance. But the fewer rules, the better. What's important is having a culture that empowers people, that they feel it's break the rules, go beyond the rules. If you don't do that, you get very locked into a staid place. So here's 4 questions to ask yourself. I'm going to talk more about True North, but how will you discover your True North as an innovation leader? How are you going to continue to develop? We're like, as leaders, we're no different than musicians or athletes. We may have been born with certain skills, but we have to continue to develop our skills, our capabilities, okay? If you're going to be a great cellist and go to Carnegie Hall, you're certainly not going to go there without practicing every day. And the same thing is true if you're going to be a tennis player and play at Wimbledon. You're going to practice every day. Well, same is true of a leader. And I say to you, everyone in this room, that get leadership opportunities early. Jump in and take them. Even if you have no direct reports, take the opportunities to lead. You learn by bouncing off the world. You learn from your own experience. I haven't explained what a sweet spot is. I'll come to that. But basically, are you operating your sweet spot where you are highly motivated by your work and you're using your greatest strengths? Don't play to your weakness. Surround yourself with people who complement your weakness. If you're not a genius in finance, find yourself a good financial person to complement what you're doing. And then finally, what's the purpose of all this? You're working, what, 60, 70 hours a week, less time with families? What's the purpose of what you're doing? Because if you don't have a purpose, why would anyone want to follow you? But if you have a clear sense of purpose, you communicate to people, you get people together around a common purpose, passion, things they really agree on doing, I think you'll have an unbeatable team. Okay? So why does leadership even matter? In my experience, leadership makes the difference between success and failure of all organizations. I don't know of any exceptions. And if I look back to the financial crisis of 08, 09, or go all the way back to the Enron, WorldCom disasters when 200 companies restated billions of earnings for each company, the reality was every one of these can be traced to failed leadership. It's not about factors like credit default swaps or subprime mortgages. That's just the vehicle. The leaders failed. Why did they fail? I think they failed because they put the short term over the long term. They played the short term game. They were gamesmen. They played the short term game and they failed. You know, you can be a gamesman, you can play the game and you can make it for a while, but in the end you won't. People know whether they trust you or not. People know who's authentic and who's not. And if you're trying to fake it to make it, you're trying to be something different than you are, in the end it'll catch up with you. And that's what happened. It caught up with a lot of them that were playing the game, and eventually it all caught up with them. And I think the other thing is, I think the cardinal sin, when we're in leadership roles, we're called not to act in our self-interest, but act in the best interests of the organization as we see it. And if leaders on top think it's their organization, it's not. Even if you own the organization, you have the responsibilities of all your employees, all your customers, and all your other shareholders and everyone else who has a stake in the enterprise. And this is an organization where a lot of people have a stake. And so I think you have an obligation to put the institution's interests first, okay? So why did they fail? Leaders don't fail, it's going to surprise some of you, they don't fail for lack of IQ, okay? In my experience, it's not the smartest person in the room who makes the best leader, okay? What you need to have is a mix of IQ and EQ. EQ, emotional intelligence, written about by Dan Goleman, knowing who you are, having a self-awareness, knowing how to read a crowd, knowing how to motivate other people, how to build your teammates, how to be authentic, how to be real. And I remember going to a session 35 years ago out here in San Francisco with the famous Buddhist monk Thich Nhat Hanh. And he said something I never forgot. He said, the longest journey you'll ever take is the 18 inches from your head to your heart. The longest journey you'll ever take is the 18 inches from your head to your heart. The integration of your head and your heart is one of the hardest things you have to do. But I think great leaders do that. And what's it mean to operate with heart? Okay? It means to have a sense of passion for what you're doing. If you don't have passion for what you're doing, people aren't going to work with you. Do you have compassion for the people you're serving? Medtronic is serving patients. You're serving people all over the world. Do you have compassion for those people and the challenges they face? Do you have empathy for the people you work with who are going through difficult times? There was that long article on Amazon, and whether that was true or not, they were, this is the New York Times, they were putting forth an organization that didn't have any empathy for their employees. If you don't have that, you're not going to sustain them and retain them for very long. You're not going to get the best out of them. They'll look at it as just a job. And most importantly, Do you have courage to go against the grain and make tough calls, make hard decisions? Those may be the best decisions you ever make, where you have to go against the grain. So do you have the courage to do that? So if you think about these qualities, passion, compassion, empathy, and courage, these are all matters of the heart. We can't teach these in the classroom at Harvard or anywhere else. We don't try. What we do is we provide an environment where people can learn about themselves in that environment, because it's critical that you have those qualities. You learn about those by bouncing off against the world, gaining experience, finding out what works and what doesn't work. By offending people, and they'll tell you, by getting open, honest feedback. Okay, whatever it is, you seem to lack passion for what we're doing, or you seem to be totally clueless about how I'm feeling about this. Those are the qualities that help make you a great leader. So you've got the IQ, or you wouldn't have been hired here. The organization's well known for hiring people with very high IQ. In fact, Laszlo Bock has a great chapter in his book on that, about how we hire the best people, how important that is. But you have to develop your EQ over time. So I want to talk more about that as we go. My mentor was Warren Bennis, who died a year ago, and he had said, I think, some important things. He said the most dangerous myth is that leaders are born, and that's nonsense. In fact, the opposite is true. Leaders are made rather than born. Now, I actually think it's both. I think you're born, all of you are born with leadership gifts, okay? Even if you have no direct reports, you have gifts of leadership, but you have to develop those. He went on to say leadership is character. It's not just a superficial question of style, okay? It has to do with who we are as human beings and the forces that shaped us, shaped us. And the process of becoming a leader is much the same as being an integrated human being. My colleague, Michael Porter, who is the guru of strategy at Harvard Business School, the most cited person in the academy, said, you know, unless you're a good human being, you can't be a good leader, which is a really interesting statement if you think about it, for him to say that. I said, can I quote you on? He said, sure, go ahead. Okay, well, what's the missing element? We have plenty of innovators. We don't have enough innovative leaders. What do I mean? Here are just a few examples. You know, I mentioned Packard and Hewlett. Today we have Page and Schmidt. We had at Intel, we had Gordon Moore, Bob Noyce, Andy Grove. We got Mark Zuckerberg and Sheryl Sandberg. You know, the early Act One of Steve Jobs, which is getting way overplayed in movies, in my opinion, and I don't know if we're telling the truth or not. And but you know, they aren't really distinguished between Steve Jobs' Act One, who had, you know, and what he did in Act Two. And he went through a tough crucible, and he learned from two of the great innovation leaders in the world that I visited with, Ed Catmull and John Lasseter, that are at Pixar, and they've created the 12 most successful animated films of all time. There's a reason for that. That's why Bob Iger at Disney, who's a great innovation leader, went out to them and he said to them, hey, you guys take over Disney Studios and reform it, because we got a moribund studio here. And so he recognized those skills. They're not just innovators, and they talk to us about how they are leading and enabling other people to innovate, okay? And so I got a few other examples up there. I think in the medical field I'm in, Roy Vagelos was a great innovation leader. His successor, Ken Frazier, is as well today. Arthur Levinson at Genentech is one of the most spectacular innovation leaders of all time. You look at what Martin at Gilead's doing, he's done some pretty outstanding work. Well, what are the characteristics? I think that innovation leaders need to be we leaders, not I leaders. I think you're not going to lead anyone just doing it for yourself. You need to have, as I said, the mix of IQ and EQ. And I think you need to have passion, compassion, and courage. You need to be able to align your teammates around clear mission and values. Do you believe in the mission of Google? Do you believe in the values of the company? If you don't, you're probably working in the wrong place, just to be blunt about it. But if you believe that, that gives you a tremendous basis. And that's what you as leaders need to do, okay? And I think all good leaders draw upon the talents of their team. It's never just about getting people to follow you. It's figuring out how can you draw out the best of people. And this is really hard. I've seen so many organizations stop doing this. They protect the mavericks. At Medtronic, I remember Earl Bakken, the founder who founded the company back in 1949. The first thing he talked about is supporting the mavericks, and something we really worked hard. They turned out our best, some of those innovation labs that were real mavericks. They didn't follow the rules. They were difficult to deal with. A lot of people didn't like them. They wanted to force them out of the organization. And I found I had to get in there and support them. They wanted to cut their budgets. They wanted to do everything negative because these people were a threat. But they actually produced the best innovations Medtronic came up with in the 13 years that I was there. And I've seen organizations, in fact, my successor, unfortunately, squeeze out most of the Mavericks. I mean, you don't have to fire them. You just tell them, we don't want you to do anything creative anymore. They'll leave on their own. And I think it's really important that that doesn't happen. It's not that top management often does it. Oftentimes it's down here and no one even sees it. They don't do it by intent. They just make the environment so bureaucratic and so negative that they leave. And I think it's a great loss to your organization when that happens. Collaboration is key, but I think what's really important is, yes, we have to make the numbers, and particularly people on top, they must make the numbers, but you don't do it by cutting the long term. I used to say to any leader, if they made their numbers by cutting out the investments, they were not going to get their bonuses, because that was not acceptable. To cut out the ventures, to cut out emerging market innovation, to cut out R&D was not acceptable. And new marketing ideas, that they had to make it to good management, good leadership, but not that way. Okay? Well, I've mentioned that the longest journey you'll ever take, I think, is from your head to your heart, but it's also that journey from being an I leader to a we leader. So I want you to think about yourself as you look at this chart. And how do you measure up on the we leadership side? I'm going to focus on that. Are you authentic? Are you real? Can you feel comfortable being yourself? Are you trying to be something you're not? You know? And I think that's all people can ask from you as a leader, that you be yourself. Do your decisions based on purpose? Or are they based on serving yourself? And are you willing to work together and bring people together for the mission, focus around the values of the organization? What's it mean by humility? You know, there are times when you have to make really hard decisions. I don't think this is about having any kind of fixed style. I think you have very flexible style. There are times you have to let people go. I don't think that's lacking humility. But you kind of know it's not about me. It's about us. It's about this team has produced this. Who is the person here that created Google Maps? I understand they started doing this on their own time, in their spare time, in their 20% time. What a brilliant innovation. How could we survive today without it? You know, that's the kind of thing. It didn't come from on top. That, you know, Larry Page had this idea to sit in his office. He designed the whole thing at night and passed it on. No, it came gurgling up from people taking their time to do these kind of innovations. And that's where a lot of the breakthroughs come from. Okay? So, but that requires certain humility to recognize I don't have all the great ideas. So I'm going to coach and mentor other leaders. I'm not going to direct them. I'm going to mentor them. I'm going to bring out. I've had the privilege of coaching hundreds of leaders, from MBAs to CEOs. And I consider it a real privilege, because all mentoring is a two-way street. And, you know, it's really about, as I said, serving customers and empowering people. But in the end, who gets the credit? Do you take credit for all the things your people do? Or do you pass them on to other people? Does the team get the credit? And what you found with a lot of I leaders is they take the credit. And a lot of people get really annoyed because they're taking the credit for what other people do. So what's an authentic leader? Authentic leaders align people around shared mission and values. At Medtronic, our mission was to restore people to full life and health. And that became what was really important. And I used to say to people, if that didn't turn you on, go to work for Merrill Lynch and trade stock, because you'll make a lot more money. But if that turns you on, you can't have a better career than restoring people to full life and health. And everything we did was focused on that singular mission. And that defined the values. Did it serve the patients? Could that product good enough to put in my mother or my son? Okay? And if it's not, it doesn't go to market. It doesn't pass our quality test. It doesn't pass our design test. Okay? It's about empowering other people to lead, not exerting power over them. And it's about serving all your stakeholders. I'm not a great believer that you just serve your shareholders. I think the shareholders only serve because we create value. Why do you have such great advertising revenues here at Google? Because you're obviously serving customers who are advertising with you, because you're getting access. I advertise to give them access to what they want to get the information, and people want to see that. And it's a great platform for doing that, better than going on NBC or something like that today. Okay? And so in the end, we know we have sustained results. But I really believe that in the end, authentic leaders are servant leaders. Okay? So what's your true north? I think your true north is really your essence of who you are. It's your most deeply held beliefs, the values, and the principles you lead by. So think about those things. If I ask you to do that, you could write down what it really is for you. The problem is you get pulled off course. You get seduced or pressured off to go in a different direction, and you lose sight of why you're there. See, each one of you, there's no such thing as two people having the same true north. We all have our own unique view of who we are, and it comes out of our life stories. It comes out of the difficult times we faced. It comes out of times we lost our way. It really gets to the essence of who we are. And it's in those difficult times in life you learn who you are. When you had to fight your way through something, you were raised in a difficult family, you had a health problem, you were confronted with poverty, or whatever it was, that's when you learn who you are. Or you really lost sight of your true north. And I'll talk about a time in just a minute where I lost sight of what my true north was. But see, I think the tough things today are the seductions. And the three main seductions are money, fame, and power. Abraham Lincoln once said, if you want to test a person, give them ultimate power. Okay, not just put them in a difficult situation. You'll find out how they use it. And the people that don't have a sense of who they are overuse that power and they self-destruct. We know that. We know that people with ultimate power do self-destruct. Okay? And so you get pressured off course because you're not willing to face difficult situations. So I think it all starts with your life story. You look at a guy like Howard Schultz that grew up in the Bayview housing projects. He takes his daughter back there. He's proud of where he grew up. It was a terrible place, okay? He had to walk up 12 flights of stairs to his apartment because the elevators didn't work, and there were drugs, and there was crime, and his father lost 30 jobs. As Howard later said, 30 rotten jobs, you know? They never had any money. In fact, when his father lost his job one time and his mother was 7 months pregnant, they couldn't pay the bills, okay? He couldn't wait to get out of there. Howard said the saddest day of his life was the day his father died, because he'd been very critical of his father for being negative, not fighting his way through, not taking more responsibility. He said he realized the day he died, his father never had a shot. And he said, my dream is to create a company that my father would be proud to work at. And that's what he's trying to do at Starbucks. Try to create a company where everyone's proud to work there and never lose sight of why we're in business. Okay, we're only making a couple of bucks of minimum wage as a barista, but we treat customers really well because we enjoy working here. The company gives us stock in a rapidly growing company. The company gives us health care. Even though I work part-time here for 30 hours a week, they give me health care. So Howard created those things all coming out of his life story. And he never lose sight of that. But he's also has a sense of fear. We all have that. We have a positive narrative about the dream of creating a great company. We also have a negative narrative. I could feel like my old man did. All of Starbucks had collapsed. He went back in there about 6, 7 years ago because he was afraid it was collapsing. And by the way, it's done spectacularly well. Howard said, I never lose sight of that fear of failure. And that drives me as well. So there are negative factors that drive him as well. But it's that. But it all comes out of his life story. And many of us face very difficult crucibles in our lives. Very difficult times we go through when things don't go our way. Early in my life, I thought I wanted to be a leader. I was kind of making up for my father's failures in leadership roles. He wanted me to be head of a major company. As a kid, I was never selected to lead anything. I joined everything, never selected to lead anything. Thinking I could be a leader, never was chosen, never elected student council, never was chosen head of an organization. I was good enough tennis player to play college tennis, and I wasn't even co-captain of my high school tennis team. So finally, my senior year, I put my hat in the ring against one other guy to run for office against president of senior class. I was clear I was a better leader than he was. I was better organized. I knew what to do. The votes came in. I lost by a margin of 2-1. So you can see no one thought I was a great leader. So I went 800 miles away from my hometown to Georgia Tech to school. I could have gone to Michigan, just across town, but I was really escaping myself. And I was trying to find an opportunity to get a fresh start. But I didn't realize that wherever you go, there you are. If you change venues, you can leave Google and go somewhere else, but if you take your same self with you, you just repeat what you did. And that's what I did. Georgia Tech, I ran for office 6 times, lost all 6. And I will never forget, a group of seniors took me aside and said, Bill, no one's ever going to work with you, much less be led by you, because you're moving so fast to get ahead. You don't take time for other people. And that was like a blow to the solar plexus, because I realized that I was never going to have the opportunity. And I had to do a lot of soul searching. I spent a whole year doing that, eventually came back and held a number of leadership positions. And then I had a second set of crucibles in my early 20s. My mother died one day, and I've been very close to my mother, but never close to my father. I'm an only child of older parents, and she died very suddenly of a heart attack. And I went into a period of mourning and depression, not quite depression, but certainly real difficult grieving process. And I recovered from my mother's death. This is 1968, about a year and a half after my mother died. I fell in love, got engaged, remarried. I was living in Washington with a bunch of guys, fell in love with a woman who lived 3 blocks away. She was from Georgia. And I remember we got engaged, remarried. It was August of '68, and I talked to her. She'd gone home to Georgia to prepare for the wedding. She'd been having some headaches. We didn't think much of it. And she was preparing for the wedding. And the very next morning, I learned that she died of a malignant brain tumor. It was 3 weeks to the day before our wedding. And I was totally devastated because I could explain, even though I'm a person of faith, my faith had no explanations. I could explain my mother's death in the natural order of things. Some of you in this room may have lost parents. It's sad, but it's the natural order of things. I just got word of somebody we were very close to lost an 8-year-old daughter. We have a granddaughter that age in a skiing accident yesterday, and it's just tragic. But I'd lost my fiance, and she was doing great work in the Appalachian Regional Commission. What happened up there? And I lost, and I really felt like I was lost. So that was my crucible, a pair of crucibles. But you know, one of the things I realized, and I would say this to all of you, I wanted to change the world, but you can't change the world, you know? You want to eliminate poverty, you want to eliminate all health in the world, maybe some people can, but I tell you what, the biggest impact you can have do with the people all around you, okay? The people you touch every day. And I had to learn that because I've been looking so far ahead, I wasn't thinking about every single action. The people you have the greatest impact, the people you work with every single day of your life. And that's what I want you to think about. So my defining leadership experience came in 1988. I was en route to the top of Honeywell. I was one of 2 leading candidates to be the CEO, maybe the leading candidate. My father always wanted to be the head of a great company. I thought Honeywell was a great company. My wife had a great job, but I was doing a series of turnarounds. Instead of being the growth-oriented leader I wanted to be, I was trying to turn businesses around. And I got through one set of them in about 3 years, and then I gave them another set for a year and a half, and then they gave me a third set. And one day I'm driving home. Now I have to, you okay here? I have to tell you at this time that I have a good life. I have 2 kids in high school. My wife has a good job, okay? And I'm driving home, and I have a good career. We have lots of friends. Driving home, and I look at myself in the rearview mirror, and what did I see? A miserable person, me. Now, how can you be miserable when you got everything going for you? I was miserable inside because I was losing it. I was losing sight of my true north. I didn't use that phrase in those days, but I was losing sight of who I am as a person. Okay? And, you know, I went home and told my wife, Penny, this. Penny's always been my closest confident advocate. I met her the year following my fiance's death, and we've been together. We just had our 46th wedding anniversary. But I told her what I was feeling, and she said, Bill, I've been trying to tell you that for a year. You just refuse to listen. See, it's the person closest to you that sees you as you are, and I couldn't fake her, you know? I couldn't fake it out with her. And so I have a men's group. Actually, you guys won't believe this. We have a meeting every Wednesday morning, 7:15 to 8:30, 8 of us for the last 40 years. We had 4 of us that started, 4 have been added, then, you know, then a couple of them went away, 1 died. Anyway, we have 8 of us, no change in the last 20 years. So I went and told my men's group. And they said, Bill, you turned down Medtronic 3 times. Why'd you do that? And I said, you know, well, listen to the ego here. I always thought I was going to be head of a really large company. Medtronic's a mid-sized company, you know? And they said, why don't you give it another shot? So I called Win Wall and the CEO back. I said, it's a job I just turned down 4 months ago, still open. He said, yeah, but we got other candidates. You're going to have to get in line. I remember talking to the founder, and eventually I accepted the job in the number 2 role for a business about 1/3 of the size I was running at Honeywell, about 1/4 as many people, you know, and I had to overcome some ego challenges with that. But you know what? I walked in there and I felt like I was coming home, kind of like I feel when I come in here, like to a group of people that I can really learn from you, and we can come together and really make a difference. And I can tell you the 13 years I spent there were the greatest 13 years of my professional career. And everything's happened to me since then opened up because of that. And I wasn't passionate about Honeywell's business. I loved being head of a global company. I didn't even love the business. I didn't like going down to the boiler room and looking at valves and stuff like that. I wasn't interested in the aerospace and defense business. That was a third or 40% of the business. And that was part of what I was running. That wasn't where my passion was. My passion was making a difference in the lives of people we served. And I hadn't seen Medtronic. I had to close that Honeywell door behind me psychologically before I could open the door to Medtronic and see the opportunity right there. So I resigned from Honeywell and went to Medtronic, and it was the best thing I ever did. So I just wanted to share you my crucible and my, what I call, defining leadership experience, because that opened up everything for me. And sometimes midlife, you hit those kind of things. You hit the wall, and you hit those difficult times, but you can't see the opportunity right in front of you. You can't see it's right there, and that's what I had to do. I guess we're back live. So quick comment on Steve Jobs from his Stanford commencement address. You can't connect the dots of your life looking forward. You must connect them looking back. See, you can see connecting the dots in my own life between losing those elections because of ego and being ego-driven to try to be CEO of Honeywell when I didn't love the business. Your time is limited, so don't waste it living someone else's life. Why am I trying to carry out my father's desire to have me be CEO of a large company? I mean, that wasn't my desire, that was his desire, okay? My poor deceased father. Don't let the noise of other people's, it's one of the hardest things to do. Everyone's telling you to go left, and you know you ought to go right. And everyone's going to be mad at you for going left, but you make that turn. You know it's the right thing to do. And to do that, you have to have courage. And no one can teach you that in the classroom. You experience that in life. To follow your heart and your intuition. I remember I said that to a group of Harvard Business School students who all wanted to go to work for hedge funds. And they laughed at me. They said, Professor, I was visiting one of the class, I said, what's your one piece of advice? I said, follow your heart. And they laughed. But I tell you, a lot of them would come back and say, you were right. That's what, that wasn't what I wanted to do. In fact, one of them did go to work for a hedge fund, now working at Google, said I finally found where I wanted to be. So that's kind of cool, okay? So very quickly, and then I want to have a chance to answer some questions. I'm going to skip over a lot of this, put it online for you. But basically, if you want to be an authentic leader, you have to be self-aware. You have to test your values under pressure. No one can tell you what values to have. You need to find your sweet spot, which I want to describe a little bit more. You need to build a support team around you like I have my wife and my men's group and my couples group. And you need to be lead an integrated life, okay? So the way you gain self-awareness, two ways. One is I think you have to process your life story and your crucibles. In other words, you have to know who you are. Second, I think you need an ongoing practice of reflection. I meditate. I've been meditating 40 years, 20 minutes twice a day. My friend Meng teaches this. We need to have some practice. Maybe that's not your thing. Maybe it's prayer. Maybe it's a jog. Maybe it's a good walk with someone you care about. Maybe it's a walk by yourself. Something where maybe it's just sitting in your room and staring at the ceiling. It's something where you have a chance to reflect. Because if you go hard 24/7 all the time, you'll never get the clarity. You'll have all this stuff going around in your head. You'll have 40 things on your to-do list, and you'll never get the clarity about what you want to do. In addition to that, I think you need feedback. Feedback, so we call the breakfast of champions. In other words, you need to get honest feedback. It's hard. My men's group gives me honest feedback. Do you have mentors in your life? Do you have people in your life who will tell it like it is? Okay? That's really essential, because without honest feedback, we can be off track. And who would pull you back from that? I've seen some people lose their way. They need people to pull them back and get on track, okay? I'm going to skip ahead here because I want to show you, I'm going to talk about your sweet spot. I hope you're in your sweet spot now. It's the place where you find you're most highly motivated, not just by money, fame, and power, but you're intrinsically motivated. You can create a product that's going to make a difference. You can have a situation where you're helping a customer, in my case, helping a patient. It's something you're really passionate about. I wasn't passionate about Honeywell's business, so I wasn't in my sweet spot. And you want to play to your strengths. If you get a job here, you ask for a higher level job, and there are a lot of areas you're not very good at, you better surround yourself with people who are. That's why when Medtronic, I had a vice chairman who knew everything about the medical business. I had a CFO, even though I was very analytical, who knew a lot more about financial markets. And so you have to surround yourself with a team of people who know more about things than you do. That's pretty critical, I think. And so I just ask you to look at these intrinsic motivations and say, does your job fulfill one or more of these things? Do you find meaning in your work? Are you able to make a difference? Do you feel like you can be true to your beliefs? Okay? If the answer to all these is no, You may not want it. You may fall back on money, fame, and power, and you may live to regret it because it may take you off course, okay? And just play to your strengths. And I think in the end, you're never going to get perfect balance in your life, okay? You're not. Life is such that you don't get it, but I can say this. Are you this, can I put this test to yourself? Are you the same person at home, at work, with your families, okay, and in your personal life? Okay? You know you're going to spend more time at work than anything else you do, including sleeping, by the way. If you do the studies, you'd like to say you sleep more than you work, but you don't. You work more than you sleep. Some of you work during your sleep, so you're thinking about things or waking up in the middle of the night. But can you be the same person? And that's having that sense of integration or integrity, which the French word is cœur, means from the heart. And if you can operate there from your heart, you'll be an effective leader. So here's just a checklist we'll put up online for you to ask yourself a few questions about, am I staying on track? And I think it's really good to have a list somewhere, make up your own list, but have a list where you're doing a daily check-in with yourself. Am I staying true to what I believe? That's really important. And let me just close a little exercise I'd like to ask you, okay? You're 97 years old, okay? None of you probably can't think about that. You're on your deathbed. You got 3 hours to live. And the good news is you live to 97. The bad news, you're on your deathbed. All your adult children have come in and gathered around you, and your grandchildren come in from all over the world. And your favorite granddaughter looks up at you. And I'm thinking my granddaughter, Dylan, who was 8, came in this morning as I was leaving Dallas, where I'd spent the weekend taking care of her. I can't call it babysitting, child care, I guess, with her and her younger sister. And she looks up at you, and she calls me Papa Bill. And she says, Papa Bill, what did you do to make a difference in the world? How are you going to tell her? Don't wait. Take it now. What are you doing to make a difference? What's your lasting mark? This world has 7 billion people. You can make a difference. You may not change the whole world. You may not be eradicate poverty. You may not be able to eradicate health problems, but you can make a big difference. Robert F. Kennedy in 1966 went to Johannesburg, South Africa, and he said, few will have the greatness to bend history itself. Now, he was sitting in the shadow of Nelson Mandela, who actually did bend history, and your leaders here are bending history, but I know I will not, and maybe some of you will. But he went on to say something very profound. Few will have the greatness to bend history itself, but each of us can commit ourselves to a series of actions to make this world a better place. And the sum total of all those actions will write the history of this generation, your generation. And that's what I'm doing, That's why I write books. That's why I'm teaching, is trying to ensure that we have better leadership going forward. We don't have people like the head of Volkswagen denying the problem, or the head of FIFA getting involved in corruption scandals. We have people who are authentic and real, who really can make a difference in the world. Margaret Mead, the great anthropologist, once said, never doubt the power of a small group of people to change the world. Indeed, it is the only thing that ever has. You're part of a small group of people. It's getting big, but you're part of a small group of people that is changing the world. And I just think how exciting that is and what you can do. Because when you do leave this life, the only thing you can take with you is what you leave behind. And I think you can leave behind a legacy that really makes a difference. And the time to think about that is now, and to stay on track of your true north throughout your life, and to create great innovations and be that innovation leader that can really have a positive impact on the world. Thank you very much. Thank you. So we have a few minutes for questions. I hope you'll ask. Please ask.
Thank you so much for being here today. It's really
Thank you for having me.
A privilege to learn from you. I was very much struck by your comment about the men's group that you've been part of for 40 years, because I find that it seems like leaders today are incredibly isolated given how much they have going on and lack that kind of support system. So I'm curious about how that formed or what we could learn from you in that, because whenever we try and construct them, if they're overly engineered, they don't really work. So that was one question. The second part of that is, have you ever in the 40 years talked about including a woman as part of that group?
Good question. I think it's invaluable to have a small group in your life that you can talk to. They're the ones I want to talk to about moving from Honeywell to Medtronic. They encouraged me to make the move. When my wife Penny had breast cancer, almost 20 years ago, I was in denial, and they helped me see I was in denial because of my fiance dying, my mother dying, that I couldn't face the fact my wife might die, the 3 women I've been closest to in my life, and they helped me see that, and that was extremely helpful. So I've learned so much from these guys. We've all gone through difficult times, and it's a group to share with. I think it has to come from chemistry between the people, and a group of people are willing to go there. They're willing to share openly. It doesn't work if one of us won't share openly. If you go around and tell me the challenges you're facing, but they come to me and I say, I'll pass. I'm not going to share with you guys, because it's got to have a group of people that are really explorers, seekers. We came out of a retreat weekend we went off to in a seminar, and 4 of us decided to form 40 years ago, and we've just stayed together ever since. You know why? Because we get so much out of it. We actually have a program. Everyone gets 2 weeks to do the program, and so it rotates throughout the group. And I've been not a very good member lately because I've teaching at Harvard a lot and gone a lot. Even been gone this Wednesday because I'll be in North Carolina. But I'm there when I'm in town, I assure you, and everyone else is there. So we also have a couples group. No, we don't have a woman in the group. We've talked about expanding. We can't get anyone to want to expand, but we have a couples group that we all went to Burgundy on a little barge trip. In fact, that's where I read Laszlo's book last week. It was fantastic. We had a whole week just with our couples group and had a chance to do a lot of reflecting. But this is a group that has similar types of discussions, and we get together and share the difficulties, but the good times we're having too. So this group meets once a month. The men's group meets once a week, but it's chemistry. And maybe you can find it in the company. It's great. You get into some issues with that in terms of I think everything's got to be confidential. And I wrote a book called True North Groups to explain how this works. But we all sign a contract to say everything will be kept confidential. Nothing goes outside the room. And we've been forming these groups at Harvard Business School now. We've had 6,000 people go with these groups. It's been the most significant thing we've done in the last decade at the school. It's very threatening to the faculty, I might add, because it's kind of threatening to someone who's been practicing their teaching in a classroom for 25 years to find out people would rather be with 5 of their peers in a 6-person group than they would be hearing a lecture from someone or even engaging in a dynamic discussion. So thank you for the question. Other questions? Abby, this is Abby Falik, who has formed a fantastic organization, okay, to provide a gap year or a year between high school and college that I think is an amazing thing to help people go off into emerging markets and learn about themselves through that experience. So ask your question, please.
Well, thank you. I mean, I wanted to thank you for the opportunity to be here with all of you.
She is a real entrepreneur, guys.
A
social entrepreneur.
lot of what you're describing speaks to me. We first met when I was at Harvard Business School, and I can see, in the 5-6 years since leaving there, my own trajectory and how much of what you teach actually proves to be so true and so valuable in practice. And so my question to you, the organization I lead, Global Citizen Year, is structurally a not-for-profit. We like to say that's our tax status and not necessarily our management style, which is part of why I went to business school. But what interests me in this notion of the innovative leader and the idea that you need to be focusing on long-term value and not making short-term decisions is how constrained we often are in the not-for-profit sector, where if we're reliant on philanthropic capital, there are rarely opportunities to really invest in R&D, in marketing, in all of the things that drive long-term value in the corporate sector. And so I can feel like my hands are sometimes tied because I've got a long-term vision and I know what it would take to get from here to there, but it's going to require taking some risks and having some failures. And traditionally, again, in the not-for-profit sector, which I wish we called the for-impact sector, to frame it as what we are and not what we're not, I feel like it's much harder to do, and candidly, these are some of the problems that we all would agree are the most important to be solving. So how do we reconcile?
Philanthropy, let me get on the other side of the table and say that what we've done about 20 years ago, and the last 12 years, my wife has run our family foundation, which we took about 1/3 of our net worth, which we gained in Medtronic stock. Eventually, we're going to put it all over there into a foundation. And we believe that philanthropy is what Penny calls my wife Penny calls a passing gear of society. And so where other things are funded routinely, this is the thing that makes it go ahead. What you're talking about is being in the passing gear. Other people could fund their kids to go overseas and live in, but you're providing that breakthrough idea. And I think that's why, and I'm excited actually that there's so much philanthropy in the Valley and so much philanthropy in general right now. I think it's a tragedy. Steve Jobs made so much money, he never gave any of it away. You know, again, you can't take it with you, guys. And so we're going to eventually give everything away, and why not do it in your lifetime? So I think philosophically, we just have to find those people that resonate with what you're trying to do. And I know how hard work that is. I know what Wendy Kopp went through in Teach for America in a similar way of starting from scratch and being totally dependent and not having an institution to come in and put a lot of money into it. But I hope and pray that you'll find those people that will allow you to do it, because that's all we fund in our foundation is people that want to do leading edge breakthrough things. We don't want to just fund the routine things. We want to fund the things at the leading edge. And by the way, that's what Google has to keep doing too, is keep funding things at the leading edge that don't pay the bills, but provide the opportunities, because they're the ones, back to Margaret Mead, they're the ones that really make the difference. Okay, other questions? Yes, thank you.
Hey, Bill. So you mentioned kind of going against the grain, which is something quite challenging to do, especially in these bigger organizations. What are some tips that you have for authentic leaders kind of going against the grain and going for things that they believe are true?
Well, the question is, what do you do to go against the grain, and what are some tips you have? It does take a lot of courage, and I think you want to consult with a lot of people before you go against the grain. But you know, again, the people that are really making a difference are ones that are going against the grain, are not just playing the game by yesterday's rules. And so I think making sure you have some support team around you that's giving you that courage to go forward, even though there's opposing forces out there, even though people say what you're saying is crazy. A lot of ideas, when I came out with them 10, 12 years ago, everyone says crazy. You know, no one thinks like this. Well, I think that's the way it's moving. I think the best leaders today are authentic leaders, and they're the ones making a difference. There's a few jerks left, but we'll try to get rid of them as fast as we can. I try to work on that in the classroom. But I think they really are authentic leaders. So you make progress, and you have to have the courage to keep going, keep going, keep going, because you believe in it. So you have to have the passion behind you. And again, you try to build, it's the bandwagon effect. You get moving. I did some things early in my career. You guys will think, well, old-fashioned. We started the consumer microwave oven business in the United States. Okay, we had to get people on the bandwagon. You need to do the same thing when you have an idea. Get people behind it, and then it becomes, oh, that's obvious. You know, Google Maps, that's obvious. Well, it wasn't so obvious when it got started. I still don't know how anyone did it. You know, so. But again, you need mentors to help you stay on track, and you need to have the courage of your convictions, and you need to have someone like my wife Penny who can be your counselor to say, Bill, okay, so you're getting this opposition. Keep going. Don't stop. And sometimes you have to put it all on the line. At Medtronic, a couple times I had to put it all on the line to go totally against the grain. And I thought we were losing it. Everyone wanted to go this way, and we decided to go the other way. Okay, took some huge risks. I might have destroyed my career, but sometimes you do. And sometimes it doesn't work out, and you have to start all over, but it's worth it, because that's what really makes a difference. So thank you for that great question. So how are we doing time-wise? Is that it? Do we have time? One more? Do you have one more question? Yes. Well, last question. Here we go. Thank you.
Yeah, I think it's somewhat related, but if you're trying to follow this, but then your leads and the leads above them are not, right? How do you deal with that? Like going against the grain where the rest of the culture, and especially people above, are a little more self-interested, and are like the left-hand column, right? The one. Yeah,
I got it.
So any suggestions on how to handle those kind of situations?
Be yourself. You're not. I know some people in organizations where they're really lone rangers. They're really going against the grain. But just be yourself and build a team around you that believes in that and gain success from doing it. And just stay with it. My son, I was talking to last night, is facing a lot of this kind of opposition, and people say, don't go there, just do this. Well, that's what I said, Jeff, that's what made you successful. Stay the direction you're going. Don't get off course, and believe in what you're doing. But also get your team to produce results so they can see that it produces, you know, that it's getting whatever the results are, that it is actually working. And I think you'll find, again, back to the question she asked, that bandwagon effect. When they see you're successful, people want to get on board. And maybe your bosses will learn a little bit about from the way you operate. And that may just influence them to the good. And it's hard for people to change, particularly when they get older. But I think we all have the capacity for change if we're willing to be introspective, look inside ourselves, and say, what's really important to me? And so I think if we can use this organization to create more innovation leaders that can really do breakthrough innovations in a wide range of fields, it'll be a great gift that Google gives to the world. So thank you all very much for having me. Appreciate it.
Great. Thank you so much, Bill, for coming.
Thank you.
Great talk. And for those of you that are interested in book signing and whatnot, we're going to be moving it outside because this room's for another customer. So thank you so much for coming, and thank you so much, Bill.
Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you very much.